Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, Dallas Buyers Club. Ron Woodruff, who's played by Matthew McConaughey, who leads a hard-partying, drug-taking, gambling, promiscuous sex living lifestyle as a good old boy electrician in Texas until he passes out, wakes up in a hospital, and they tell him he has AIDS. He doesn't, of course, believe it at the time in 1986, and he was pretty homophobic at the time, but he learns more about his disease and starts going to Mexico to get drugs for his disease because it's nearly impossible to get AIDS medication in America at the time, unless you're part of a free trial and you have to be selected, if you meet all this stuff. It just was too much red tape. So he goes to Mexico and gets better stuff, better protein than is being approved by the FDA at the time. And then he starts to set up buyers clubs where he could make tons and tons of money. Since most of his friends won't talk to him after they find out he has AIDS, he slowly changes as a person, gets less and less homophobic. And whereas at the beginning of the film he's saying all sorts of homophobic stuff, by the end of the film all of his friends are gay. And he'll stand up for his friend Rayon, played by Jared Leto, who's a transgender woman who he has started his Dallas Buyers Club with. And a Buyers Club basically was you sign up for membership and they give you the drugs you need. It's not like a regular drug dealer. This is membership and they find out the drugs you need, and he learns more and more about the disease and changes the Buyers Club to make it more and more about helping these people. And you see the transformation of Ron Woodruff as he is transformed as a person through this experience and his fight against the FDA, who doesn't want him having a Buyers Club because a lot of these drugs aren't approved, and they of course want the drug companies to use their drug AZT, which he does not approve of himself. Dallas Buyers Club is kind of, I guess, similar, not at all really, but in some ways similar to another film that's come out recently called 12 Years a Slave, because they're both very much Oscar pictures. When you talk about Dallas Buyers Club, of course, you're going to talk about how Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto lost tons and tons of weight. Matthew McConaughey reportedly 50 pounds, Jared Leto reportedly 30 pounds. And this is actually Jared Leto's first film in about 4 years. So it's very showy, Oscar-y movie. But I think also, like 12 Years a Slave, it kind of shows me why people used to like Oscar pictures and why people used to take prestige pictures seriously, because it's often hard to take them seriously. They're blown up so much during a season, but I feel like they're often forgotten because a lot of them aren't very good. And this film isn't perfect, but certainly a lot of Oscar movies are about acting. They're much more about acting than story a lot of times, but this film, the acting and the story play hand in hand with one another. And that very much goes with Matthew McConaughey's performance, because you see him really transform as a person and seeing him become more of a tolerant person, seeing his life change so much. It does capture that time of the early days of the AIDS crisis and how kind of like no one really was doing their part to save people from this disease. No one was really helping get proper medication at the time. With Matthew McConaughey's character becoming more tolerant and caring more and getting more and more educated. That's kind of one of the things you had to do if you had AIDS at the time, become more and more educated. That's the real arc you're following. It's a really interesting and I'd even say like heartwarming arc to follow, because you really see him going through something, changing through something, becoming more of a tolerant person and more of a better person through it. I think his difference between him and Rayanne, played by Jared Leto, it's kind of like an odd couple thing. They do kind of play up his homophobia a little too much at times. Maybe he was really like that, I don't know. But it felt like sometimes they played it up a little too much. They played the shaky cam documentary angle that these movies have to. If you're really going to take anything out of it or nominate it for something, it's probably going to be the acting. McConaughey was really great because you see him grow as a person, but he has this charm about him. You can see that he's a movie star. You really want to follow him, you root for him as an audience member, and you see him change and become more tolerant. You know, it doesn't shy away from the fact that he was bigoted at the beginning, and he talks about, they find out Rock Hudson has AIDS at the beginning of the movie before he knows he has AIDS, and he talks about how he's a cocksucker and things like that. You see him change through him getting AIDS through the entire film, and McConaughey's good at that. He's good at having like kind of a swagger about himself, a presence about himself, and you like want to follow him. He seems like just his cool movie star self, but through a prestige picture doing all the showy acting, but still being Matthew McConaughey. That's the thing I like about him through all this, through his Magic Mikes and his Muds and all this stuff. He really just comes in and livens up the picture. He has like such a movie star presence and uses it in the right way. They know how to be the center of the attention. They know how to be the fun person in the room, and almost like kind of like a Robert Downey Jr. is excellent at that, better than almost any movie star currently. McConaughey did that in this film. I wanted to follow him. I wanted to root for him, and not just because I had seen this journey, because he was so likable. He was so much fun. Despite this being a serious movie, it had a very audience-friendly appeal to it, and I honestly think a lot of that was Matthew McConaughey, way more than the directing, and that really says a lot about an actor, that he can be the person that you are connecting to. I like Jared Leto a lot. I didn't actually know he hadn't been in a movie in so long. He was almost unrecognizable, but he knows how to play off of Matthew McConaughey's character very well. It was interesting seeing Steve Zahn. This film had a very 90s cast. You had Matthew McConaughey, Steve Zahn, Jared Leto. Wow, these three in a movie? I mean, what is it, 1997? This and 12 Years a Slave kind of makes me like Oscar bait a little more. It doesn't make me love it. I don't think this is an amazing movie. One of the things about this movie, and why I talk about how McConaughey's acting is the thing that really brought me into it and got me into it as an audience member, is I don't think this film was structured in a way, like the ending seemed a bit messy, where it's like, well, what is this about? The FDA fight, or, you know, Ron Woodroof as a character? It's kind of a character piece, but it's kind of also this Erin Brockovich thing. The way Erin Brockovich has a center about it. This film, I think, does it very well without having a center for a long time, but eventually that falls apart because there's no idea behind what they're doing. There's no theory behind why they've decided to go on this route in the story and then go on that route in the story. I think this film is strong enough where it doesn't hurt it too much. Certainly at the beginning, it's really just about Ron Woodroof, and I think that would work better as a through line if it had just been about Ron Woodroof. But the FDA fight, which comes in, you know, later and goes on throughout it, I don't think is as strong as it is about him as a character. And I kind of feel like if this film had just stayed with him as a character, it would be a lot stronger. But so much of that was what he was about as a character and what his life was like at the time, so I'm conflicted because, well, you had to keep it in, but I just don't think it really worked at the end because I didn't feel like it had the greatest ending. I was like, I really liked the movie, and there are often times where I wasn't sure, what is this film exactly about? The direction just isn't as interesting. It feels like just the way you're supposed to direct a prestige picture at this point in time, and that's kind of what's so boring about it. Thankfully, this film has such great performances and a good enough story behind it that it can get through all that, thankfully. And the director doesn't like ruin it or anything. The FDA thing, I think, almost felt a little more simplistic than what they're really trying to say with him as a character and showing his arc as a character, and also maybe showing kind of our understanding of age changed from 1986 to when he died in 1992. It was almost entirely pretty much about him, but it's kind of side notes kind of made it a little too messy. But with McConaughey's performance and Jared Leto's performance were so strong, much like 12 Years a Slave, I think this is actually a decent Oscar picture. So if you have seen Dallas Buyers Club and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.